Well, hello there everybody, Boyd here with you again, and welcome back to another update on our Enterprise Refit build. Well, today in front of you guys you can see I have a brand new set of masks for doing our Aztec painting on the model. I want to say a shout out to Gary at Mask Design. Gary's up there in Canada. So kind of Gary to send me a set of these masks to try for my next phase of the build here. I'm really excited to get started working with these. I've been kind of looking them over the last couple days and do a little bit of test painting and everything, and I'm happy with the results so far. Gary's done a wonderful job on these masks. I was familiar with working with the orbital dry dock masks from the past couple of refits that I've built, and Gary's improved on that a little bit here with a lot more detail. It takes a lot of time and effort to do the research to look at the entire Enterprise Refit, every little panel, every detail, and try to match it to what was originally seen on the screen. There are a couple little features on this set that go beyond where the orbital dry dock masks did. I'll show you a couple of those little features as we page through some of these masks here, and they're just a really nice set of masks. I just wanted to give you guys kind of a little overview of these. A little bit later in the video we're going to be actually preparing the masks, and then we're going to lay them down on the model and do a little bit of Aztec painting today. So I'll talk about the actual paint that I'm going to be using. We're going to talk about the tools that you need to work with these, and kind of get you familiar with what it's like to work with a set of these masks. But again, I'm really happy. You can see that this is the standard set of masks that you'll get from Gary if you order a set of these. And you see that we have three different types of material here. We have the black, the blue, and the sort of tan or gray looking material. If you guys have worked with the old orbital dry dock mask, you'll be kind of familiar with this. This is from a company called Mask. They have a little part number on the back. And so whenever I work with these kind of things, I kind of do my own little bit of research, and so I went online and looked these up. You can actually find out all kinds of really interesting technical information about this material. You can find out what it's designed to be used for, how long it can be expected to last, all kinds of different things. And one of the important things that you can find out is that how sticky it is. In other words, they give you an exact number for how much tensile strength it takes to pull it off of the surface after it's been stuck down. And so what I found is that our material here, this blue is the most sticky, the black is a little less sticky, and the gray is the least tacky of them all. So what everyone's trying to do when they design these masks, you guys, is that there's a fine balance between, everyone's saying, well, why not make them, the same all the way through? Well, the reason is that in some cases on this model, you guys, you're going to be reusing certain masks, and if you take the mask off and put it back down the first time you do that, like I would say this gray material here, it loses quite a bit of its tackiness right off the bat when you do that. Now sometimes you can get away with it, and you want to be careful at your air pressure that you're using. I'm spraying with an airbrush at really low pressure. I think I'm right around 18 psi. I can't go much lower than that before the paint will start to splatter, but I'm as low as I can go on that to avoid blowing off any masks. The air can actually blow the masks off the model while you're spraying, and that's not a good thing. But there's also the issue of certain shapes and curves and everything on the model. So let's say if you're working on the saucer, the top part, and it's totally flat up there, and you're putting down fairly large panels, you don't need the stickiest type material for that, right? Unless you're gonna need to be reusing it. So what Gary has done with this design is there's some areas you're gonna be reusing the masks, and sometimes you're going to be putting down a completely new replacement if you have to pull that mask. Because what happens is, if you got two adjacent panels next to each other and you want to spray them two different colors, you have to lift the mask on one, paint it, put the mask back, lift the mask on the next one, paint it, and put it back, so you don't get overspray crossing over between the two. The Enterprise Refit, all the individual color blocks are by themselves. They are not like blended together or whatever. So that's an important thing to remember. Okay, so when you're doing that, you're going to have a different need for, when you're going to need this certain type of material and when not. And Gary's kind of gone through and been fine-tuning on this. It's a constant thing that people that design these are trying to do, get the correct balance between, how sticky they are. And there's also the transfer tape here. Now, this is what really makes this type of a masking set shine, you guys. What the transfer method allows you to do is be able to place large groups of masks on your model at the same time, right? Now, there are a couple other masking sets out there, maybe one that's out there for the Enterprise Refit that doesn't use that method. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to hand pick each and every mask off of that sheet, and you're going to have to put it on the model all by itself. And that can be extremely time consuming and really tedious, not to mention that there are a couple of reasons that can be more of a problem. Just think about trying to, put a water slide decal down where you got to kind of move it a little bit, and you can use the water to slide it around. Well, you don't have the sliding part. You have a really sticky, really flimsy little mask. They're really flimsy without the backing paper on them. So trying to get it on there straight, if you have to keep picking it up, it's going to try to grab wherever you touch it, and it's going to stick down right away. So you can damage the mask trying to do that, trying to get them on all straight. With the transfer tape method, the masks are all arranged perfectly on the sets here. So when you're picking them up off and putting them down onto the model, they're transferring and staying exactly the same. Where if you're doing it one by one, you're going to have a hard time getting everything down there exactly perfect, and spacing, the spacing and the, either crooked or straight or whatever. So this is definitely the way to go. It'll save you a tremendous amount of time and hassle doing this. So with that said, we also have the issue here of the transfer tape and how strong it needs to be. If you make it too strong, what will happen is that you can pick the mask off. You're going to rub them down on top of the mask, pull it off the backing sheet, and when you go to transfer it and put it onto the model and do the rub down there and try to pull the tape away and leave the mask behind, it won't leave the mask behind. It's too sticky, and the mask will keep coming up with it. It's too sticky for the backing on the masks themselves. So what they're trying to do here, you guys, is they're trying to fine-tune that to where it's all balanced out, right? Where you might have to compromise a little bit with one thing and you're going another way, but you get it, the best you can. And I think Gary's probably, like a lot of these people, is probably trying to constantly, this is constantly evolving, and he's trying to work on that and get it all dialed in. Now, I found on this particular transfer tape that this tape is not actually working very well for me. I'm having a little issue where it won't pick up the blue mask. It'll barely pick up the black mask, but it won't pick up the blue masks at all. So I talked to a couple of friends of mine who had gotten this set, and they had gotten it a year or two ago, or maybe a couple years ago, and did a refit. And the transfer tape that they got was different than this. It actually has a number on it. So I think Gary may have just recently switched to this or something, but I'll be giving him some feedback on that. If he sees the video, he'll obviously get that. But so he'll probably take a look at that or whatever, and maybe do his own testing on it again or whatever. But I had a little bit of trouble with it. It was taking me way too long to transfer than it was to actually do the weeding and all the other, getting the mask prepped. So I remember working with the old gray type material here, that it went really, really fast when I was doing the two refits that I did before. I didn't have a problem with that. So I went over to my local vinyl supply store, and I bought a couple sheets of this. This is the transfer tape. This is a little bit stickier, and you can see it's a different material. Gary's material here is extremely clear, and it's really thin. This is a little bit kind of opaque looking, almost has a little texture on it. But this stuff is really cheap, and I bought a couple different ones that are sticky and less sticky, and I've been just kind of playing around with it, seeing what's going to work best for me. And I've kind of got dialed in on this one here. It's able to lift the mask with no problem. It's letting go of them like it needs to. So you may have to do a little bit of fine-tuning yourself and playing around with it a little bit, but I'm sure Gary told me he was very interested in feedback and everything. So if you guys are out there using these sets, make sure any little issues you find or whatever, let Gary know, because he's very open to. I believe 100% he wants to come up with a really perfect set of masks for this, and he's just a really good guy. He's communicating via email. He's been really helpful to me so far, and so I wanted to talk a little bit more about this material again. So I was having a little bit of issue with the blue masks. To me, I feel like they're a little bit too sticky, but I can see where there's certain areas on the model where you're going to need the more sticky type masks. So I'm not going to totally discard these or whatever, but I talked to Gary about it, and he was really cool, and he sent me over a set of replacements in the gray material, which I'm more familiar with. We have this set here, which is for the top and the bottom of the saucer and a couple other little spots. Now, he told me that he's pretty much set on using the blue masks in certain areas where you need a lot of stick, and I don't blame him. He's probably done a lot of testing and figured that out, but you'll just kind of have to work with it. Now, I do know that Gary will work with you too. If you place your order and you tell him you basically want to use mostly the gray type material, he'll send you a set like that. He'll kind of work with you on that. I know he's done that for a couple other people out there. So either way, whatever I run into now, I'm completely covered. I don't have to worry about it, and I can switch over to one to the other depending on the situation, and I'll be able to keep moving forward. Now, one little thing I want to point out too about this masking material, just to give you guys a heads up, is that you see here what we have is we have this Oracle 631, this part number on here, you guys, you can actually go online and you can look up and see all the information about this, like what it's intended to be used for, all the way down to the technical information about, okay, this, how much pressure it takes, tensile pressure to lift it off of the surface, right? So that's really important. So you need to, you need to pay attention to, like, when these designers are dialing all this stuff in, they're looking at those numbers, I'm sure, and they're saying, okay, this one is strong enough to lift this one, and vice versa. And when I did look it up, it did show that the blue is the stickiest, the black a little less sticky, and this gray one is a little less sticky yet. But the other thing is that normally the masks I've worked with before, they have a little S, as in Sam, at the end of this part number, and what that means is it's for solvent-based paint, okay, which I'm using. I'm going to be using the lacquer-based iridescent paints from McKensie. That paint is the closest paint available that we have today to what was used on the original filming model. That paint was made by Crescent, and I'm trying to go for as close of a look to that as I can. That unfortunately, this particular paint is not available outside of the U.S. They won't ship it because it's flammable. The people in the U.K. can't get it, so people are using other substitutes such as Pearl X, mixing that with some clear. They're using the water-based McKensie paints, which unfortunately when I tried that a couple years ago, I wasn't impressed with it. Not nearly as much as I was the lacquer-based, for the main reason is that it seemed to me that to get the same look or the same coverage or whatever, that you had to put a couple of coats of that down. It didn't cover as well. And so what happens with that is you get a built-up edge around the edges of the mask. When you pull all your masks off, you get like this textured surface, and that's a no-go for me. The Enterprise Refit's supposed to have a completely smooth surface, and you can cover a little bit of that up with clear coat, but you can only put so many coats of clear over the top of this iridescent paint, or it starts to go away. You start to lose that effect, and I found that 1 or 2 coats to the max, at the max, is the most you can go. Otherwise, that shimmering effects, or flip-flopping and disappearing thing starts to go away to where they totally disappear and you can't see, especially with the blue and the I think maybe the red is affected quite a bit like that, so we don't want that to happen. But so I was concerned that using my solvent-based paint with this non-solvent-based material, I might have an issue because there is a reason why they make 2 different ones. And so I talked to a couple of my modeling friends, and Gary had told me that he's got several clients out there that have been using these masks with the solvent-based paints, and they've haven't had a problem. And one of the guys, Chuck Brooks, that I really trust, that he's been doing a couple of refits out there, and he's using the exact same paint that I'm using. He hasn't had an issue, but he told me he tries to keep his painting really light and not let it get too wet, and let it dry pretty quick and everything. So he hasn't had an issue. So hearing all that, I was a little bit more confident about it. I did a little bit of test spraying, like I said, and I haven't had an issue. So I'm going to be spraying this on very lightly and letting it, that way it'll dry really quick. And it turns out with this type of paint, you don't need very much paint anyway. It's a very light coat. But maybe what Gary could look at in the future is that when he gets low on this material or whatever, he can switch over to the solvent-based paint or solvent-based masking, because it looks to me like they cost pretty much the same. And that way, because that will work for both, you can use the solvent and the water-based for acrylic or whatever you want to use, and you don't have to worry about it. That way, anybody who buys these masks can use whatever kind of paint they want, and he only has to sell the one set. He doesn't have to have different ones or whatever. The old orbital dry dock, I noticed, I looked at a few of my old scraps, and those were always in the solvent-based, and I never had an issue at all with those. But just kind of food for thought, and I'm not telling Gary how to run his business or anything, but it might be something he can take a look at. And he's asked for feedback, so I've emailed him a couple times, and I'm sure he'd be happy to hear from you guys too that are out there using these. That's the thing. Talking to a lot of people that make products, aftermarket stuff for the refit and stuff like that. A lot of people are buying this stuff, but they're not getting a lot of feedback from people, because people, this model, let's face it, it's a model that it is going to be a dedicated project when you get into it. So a lot of people buy all the stuff they need, and they kind of sit on it for a while, because I haven't found even very many videos on YouTube where everyone's showing using much of the aftermarket, or you look at a lot of final builds that are out there on YouTube, and you don't see any of the aftermarket parts like the stuff that's available from some of the 3D printing shops and HDA Model Works and some of the other people. So it's they much appreciate feedback, guys. In the real world, you know, you design something, you know, on paper it works or whatever, but real world feedback is really valuable information. So don't be shy about sharing that, and especially back, you know, Jerry's the same way at HT Model Works. If you have something of his that you're using, and you may have some suggestions or whatever, or insight on how it's working, don't be shy about letting him know about that. That's really, really valuable information, and those guys do appreciate it. So we're going to move forward with the non-solvent base, but I'm not expecting to have any problems. I just wanted to put it out there so you guys are aware, not really kind of picking on it or anything. But let's take a look at the masks themselves, you guys. As I mentioned, Gary has done a really awesome job on this. He's taken the level of detail to the extreme, and it takes a lot of, you know, patience and research to find out all the detail that's on the Enterprise Refit. I mean, there's just literally thousands of panels on there. And comparing this set to the orbital dry dock set, he's made a few additional detail improvements as far as including some little extra things here and there that weren't on the old set. So hats off to Gary for that. It's really, really nice. Some of the stuff that's on here I didn't realize myself that were on the refit, but we'll just kind of flip through some of these. This one here's kind of hard for you guys to see this, but this is for the main registry on the top of the saucer, the NCC 1701 in the black with the red border. So if you want to, you can airbrush that on your model, which is a really cool option to have. Haven't made up my mind if I'm going to go detail or paint yet, but we'll see. Here's some wedges for the top of the saucer. You do want to pay really close attention to the instructions with this set, you guys, because there are a difference between, for example, the top wedges and the bottom wedges on the saucer. They are a little bit different. The number 5 set is for the top, and the number 3 group is for the bottom. Okay, we got some more of those. Now, when I did my testing with the black mask, I thought they were a little bit too sticky, so Gary's got me these replacements in the gray, so I'll be using those. Okay, here's for the strong back area. Okay, you get paint on that entire detail, which is really nice. This one I thought was really nice. It's probably, you can't see it here, you guys, but this is the there are a bunch of small little masks here for just the detail on the lower planetary sensor, which there's a lot there. We're going to be probably spending an entire video just working on that one little area there when we get to it. This is for around the deflector housing. Some more of this kind of strong back detail. All along, sprinkled along in these different areas of the sheets, there's some little window masks and all kinds of different little shapes that you can definitely use. This looks like it's for the tail end of the nacelle, the kind of candy cane stripes that we're used to seeing. Okay, some brick type patterns there. This is for the side of the photon torpedo launcher, the striping that goes on that, the part of the neck, and so on and so on, you guys. So you can see the gray stuff a little bit better. This is obviously for the warp nacelle. That's that beautiful pattern that goes on the top of the warp nacelle. Okay. Let me see here. This is the more nacelle. Let me see if I can find something different here for you guys. Oh, this is one detail I thought was really cool. You got masks here for your thruster ports and all kinds of little things. But for these little hatch covers that are on the bottom of the saucer, apparently there was this little swirl pattern that they included in that. I never knew that was there on the refit, but checking around a little bit, yeah, it was definitely there. And Gary has added that little detail so you can paint your little hatch covers that way. That's pretty cool. And some, looks like these are either phaser bank masks, or these are these are masks for the individual gold, some of the individual gold panels, I believe, that are on the top and the bottom of the saucer. These are overlays for your tertiary colors now. So like your pie wedges on top and bottom of the saucer, we're spraying down a couple of primary colors, primarily the blue and the gold. So you're starting off with those masks. And then after you finish with that, you've got these overlays that you can put over top of those, and you're going to spray on your tertiary colors. That's mixing some green and some gold and red. You know, all 4 colors. You're mixing that in and overlaying it, so the whole pattern starts to look a little bit more busy, and it kind of blends all in together. And so you can lay these over the top, weed these off, and just spray where you want, and then you've got that, instead of having to mask all that stuff all individually or whatever, if you're going to do that by hand. So that's a really nice touch. Some of this stuff looks like that might be for the pylons and something, you know, some blow-out panels. Yeah, these are from the beautiful Thunderbolt designs for the for the warp engine pylons, some more for the back half of the nacelles, that candy cane. Just kind of going through this really quick to show you. Here you can really see the beautiful design on the pylon lightning bolt effect. Now this one design I saw I thought was really cool because, you know, there's been a long discussion out there about the refit, about what's actually underneath the fantail, the paintwork that's down there. It's really difficult to see it in the movie, but this is the actual pattern that's there. Now, if you guys remember, Paul Olson, when he did the paint job on the model, he did a kind of a freehand. There are actually some pictures of that online you can look up. He did kind of a freehand kind of thing where he had reverse curves, you know, going towards each other, and then kind of a crosshatch. And interesting design, but that design did not really like tie in with the rest of the paneling. So at some point that was changed. I've actually talked to Paul about that, and he doesn't really know who did it. He's thinking it was probably Ron Gress, who did some of the other painting on the original model around the strong back area and things like that, and he did do some of the Aztec paneling here and there. But this is the actual detail that was there, and you can see it kind of more closely resembles in shape some of the other panels that were there. Interesting is that on the forward part of the belly, just ahead of this on the original paint job, it had these sort of large arrows pointing forward. Like when I asked Paul about that, he told me that he wanted to do some, you know, like a little design like that to give it like a forward motion look to it. They changed that entire thing too, to where you see that kind of more familiar brick and mortar pattern. So that was probably Ron's work. Unfortunately, Ron's no longer with us and he can't answer that question, but Paul really doesn't know who worked on it after he was finished with it. So they did a few little minor tweaks to it after that, but really interesting that they've got this updated and you can now actually paint the accurate panel design on there. Here's some more masks for the registration. You're going to be reusing a couple of these. Okay, whenever you got to overlay it. Here's for the belly, and here's for the side around the arboretum. Got that nice brick and mortar pattern there, and more for the pylons. Okay, now I want to point out too that when you order this set, Gary will send you an email, and you're going to receive that in your email. It'll be a PDF file which has a complete set of instructions. This does not come with a set of paper instructions, so you want to make sure you don't miss that. Mine happened to wind up in my junk folder, and I missed it, and Gary was kind enough to send me another one. So we can, I've got my computer screen right here. Whenever I need to reference anything, I just pull it right up, and I use that to guide me through. Tells me what all these masks and where they go and everything. So Gary did a great job on these. I just wanted to say that it's a really nice set. I'm really looking forward to working with it. Now, the other thing that I will recommend you guys is that to paint this model, you also probably want to invest in the Trek Modeler Paint Guide. That's available out there too in a PDF form or printable version, I believe. That is invaluable as far as telling you where certain colors need to go on the ship. Okay, they've done a lot of research on that, and Trek Modeler turns out some beautiful models. And I've been watching his work for a long time. Kind of one of his early videos is what inspired me a long time ago to build my first refit. And he's done a lot of research on where all those colors go and everything. So that's really valuable information. It's one thing to sit there and look at screenshots and everything from the movie, but you can only see so much. But, you know, the bottom line is, guys, is that there are some basic panels that you can see here and there in the movie, so you get kind of an idea about where they go, but no one knows for sure exactly where all these colors go, so don't worry about being totally exact. Paul himself admitted to me that he couldn't replicate that paint job color for color if he tried it again today too, because they didn't give him any clear instructions on how to do that. They said, this, you know, we want this particular pattern, and Paul just kind of went through and laid down colors and said, okay, this looks good with that, and I like this, and I like that. And he just went with it. It was kind of just a on-the-fly kind of thing. And so replicating that, you know, it's one thing to do it freehand or, you know, freelance like that when you're laying it down. It's another thing, much more difficult to try to actually replicate that for the next guy behind. So, but anyway, you can, you know, with the Trek Modeler Guide, you can get a really good idea where all the general type stuff goes. Like I said, these little tertiary colors that you're going to spray on the top of the saucer, you can kind of be free there a little bit and just put your own kind of colors where you want them. It starts to look so busy that, you know, no Enterprise expert's going to be able to come up and tell you, well, that one doesn't go there and that one doesn't go there, because he doesn't know either. No one knows. I mean, it's just kind of one of those things. There's a long time, as we all know, you know, in the modeling forums and everything, there's all kinds of debates and all that, and some of it's kind of funny because people that are, you know, experts on it have never even seen the real model or didn't work on the real model or anything. So take some of that with a grain of salt, you guys. That's what I kind of do. But all right, so there's a look at the mask, you guys. I hope that covers it for you. What I'm going to do really quick now is I'm going to set up and bring in the tools and everything, and talk about how we actually prepare these masks and get them ready to transfer onto the model, show you the kind of tools you need, and we'll cover all that, and then we'll get a couple masks prepped and ready to apply onto the model, and we'll finish up the video by doing some actual painting today. Excited to get to that, guys. We'll be right back. Alright, so let's talk about some of the basic tools that you're going to need to prepare the masks and then put them onto the model. You can see we just got a little basic set of tools here, nothing really fancy needed at all. Starting off here, you're going to need a really good sharp pair of scissors, because we're going to be cutting out these masks away from the excess material that they come on the sheets, getting those trimmed down to size. You're going to need them to do various little things here and there all through the whole preparing and application process, cutting out our transfer tape to make it the same size, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. Then here we're going to be using a number 11 hobby blade here. This is going to come in handy for doing a little bit of trimming here and there on the masks. Now you'll notice that sometimes when you go ahead and weed the masks off, you start pulling off little pieces that every once in a while you'll see a little micro sliver left over on the edge of something from the actual masking material. And they're so tiny that, you know, you could probably just put them down like that and spray your paint over it and you would never notice it. But I just want to kind of go the extra mile, and I'll get in there and I'll, you know, take my little blade here and cut that off. Also, when we're cutting up our patterns here and everything, sometimes you got the edge that goes around and stuff like that. You can trim on the corner so you can pull it in sections instead of trying to pull it off all in one huge chunk or whatever. So that definitely comes in handy. Then we've got our squeegee here. Now basically what we're using this for is we're working on a nice flat hard surface here. That's really important too. Don't use a soft surface, especially when you're doing the cutting, because you want to have a pinpoint spot where you're going to be cutting and doing things, and you don't want to have a soft thing where it like sinks in and, you know, some problem like that. So just make sure you have a nice clean level hard surface here. That'll help you for doing the not only the cutting, but then when you do the rub down, you're going to be placing these down like this, putting your transfer tape on top, going like this in a motion like this, putting more and more pressure on that until you get a good bond, and then you try to roll back the edge and see if you're lifting, and if you are, you're all set. Once you pick this up, you got to take it over to the model, put it on the surface there, repeat so you can roll it back off and leave the mask behind. So a nice squeegee like this is nice because you can see it has nice tapered edges and everything. It's kind of designed for that. You can find these in a lot of places. The masking kits sometimes even come with them, but that's a must-have. Now, the other thing you want to keep in mind too is that always when you're going to do this part like this on the model, make sure that next to the panel that you're doing that to, there's tape there, or there's some, you know, protected surface. You don't want to drag this over the top of your nicely painted iridescent panels. You know, it'll definitely put scratches in it. So just kind of be advised about that. Now, the next thing that I'll mention here, and this is probably the most important part, important tool that I'm showing you right now, you guys, having a good pair of tweezers is totally critical for this, because, and you need to use tweezers that you're comfortable with in your hand, but that are also like not too sharp. Okay, some people prefer the straight. I like the little angled cut. I just feel like I can kind of manipulate it a little bit better. But this is an old worn out pair of tweezers, and I just keep it around here because it is worn down, and so the tips are not really sharp. Because what you have to do, you guys, is once these masks are down on the model and the surface has been painted and it's dry and everything, you're going to get a little bit of bond between the paint and the masks and the surface. You know, you've got overspray that's connected, so you're going to break this kind of little seal. And so what you need to do is you need to be really careful, really patient. Don't try to do this too fast, and you're going to have to reach in carefully and get underneath of the edge of that mask with this tweezer, and so you can grab a corner of it and start peeling it up. And then you can, you know, once you get enough of it up, you can get it with your fingers or whatever. Now, what I also try to do is, anywhere I can, I'll take some good strong tape and I'll try to lift it with that first before I even try using this, right? And it may not take all the masks off, but it might grab some of the smaller ones or whatever, and that'll save you a whole bunch of time too. So, but you're eventually going to definitely have to use these, and that is critical, you guys, because the thing you don't want to happen is get what we call the dreaded pick marks. And that's something that's a total no-no for me here. I hate that when that happens. I've sanded down entire panels and redone them when I've got a couple of those in my stuff because I just hate it. If it was just on the flat white surface of the hull, you might not notice it that much, especially, if you're not right up on it like with a magnifying glass. But when you spray the iridescent paint over the top of that, what you've created is you've created like a little deep spot where you dug in, and then the paint also rose up a little bit, so you got a high spot, and that metallic sheen will hit that every time the light hits it. So as you move around, these little things will just pop right out at you and just drive you crazy. So like I said, I've spent hours sanding down complete and redoing it when something like that happens. So for me, that's definitely a no-go. The best way to avoid that, like I said, use the lowest tack masks that you can stand without lifting, when you're spraying and all that, and then a really good pair of tweezers, and practice a little bit before you, like maybe you want to start on the, I feel pretty comfortable where I'm at, so I'm going to be doing it on the top, but maybe if you've never done this before, start on a part of the model that, that you're not going to, it's not like an obvious spot everyone's going to see, like maybe do the bottom of the saucer, or, a less obvious area, or even take some scraps and put it down on a piece of plastic, paint it and everything, and simulate like you're working on that and practice picking those off, because you don't want that to happen, guys. It really sucks if it does, and all your hard work gets ruined. So that's just another little thing to think about. So talking about that, the last thing I'm going to show you here is my eyes are pretty good, but I still use these magnifying glasses with this light, guys. I will get right up on here like this when I'm weeding these masks, taking these panels off, so I can see really clearly, and I can see if one's getting snagged, or because what'll happen is sometimes they'll snag up when the cutter hasn't completely cut through, and you don't want the mask to roll over too, because they're sticky, and grab an adjacent mask that you don't want to pull, and it pulls it off when you're trying to, you could, if you're really careful, you can grab those out of there and put them back, but you don't want that to happen in the first place. So you want to get really close when you're looking at these. And then, like I said, I'll do that little thing here where I'll get right down in here and look and see if there's any little, jagged edges or anything left over. And I'll trim those out with my number 11 blade and get these all clean and ready to go. Okay, so if your eyes are super, super good, you might not need to do that. But for me, which I think my eyes are still pretty decent, I still like to do that just to get up there right on it and make sure I'm, being as clean as I possibly can. And so then you're also going to need some tape, you guys. Now, I bought this flexible vinyl tape here on Amazon for $10, and I got a set of rolls that go from, I think they start off at a 1/16 of an inch and go up all the way up to an inch. I think there's like 6 different ones, and for like $10, and this stuff is great. I found it to be, the Tamiya tape is a little bit better, and I keep a couple of rolls of that around here for painting like the really perfect stuff that I want to paint totally perfect, like on an edge and not have any kind of leaks or anything. But this is some flexible vinyl tape, and you're going to need that for some of the curved areas that you're going to be masking off, so that you can back tape away from that with regular tape. Okay, and then you're going to just use some regular good old blue painter's tape to paint, mask away from your edges when you lay down these pie wedges, for example, so you're not, when you're putting your squeegee over that, you're not dragging that over the top of the bare painted surface like I just said. So you're going to need this for different things, masking adjacent panels, all kinds of things. And then I use a little bit of this to try to pull some of the masks off too when I'm done painting. If it'll lift them, great, that saves me a little bit of time. But yeah, this stuff is working fine. It's made with a it's got a, the adhesive is made to like not leave any kind of residue behind. Okay, so they lift really clean. I haven't really tried to paint like really close with my airbrush to see how good they do like that, but for general painting and general masking, I'm having no problem with it at all. It's really good stuff, and for a really good price. Now, one last thing I'll talk about. If by chance when you finish doing all your masking and you've done your painting and everything, and you pull all your masks off, occasionally you might see a little bit of residue left behind from something, some kind of adhesive or whatever. And sometimes you'll see some little fine edges around the edges of where your patterns are, where like maybe a tiny little bit of paint melted, or a little bit of the adhesive is still there. And if you can't see it with the normal eye, but like I said, I get up here and look at it with these. And to get rid of that, don't panic. There's a product out there called wax and grease remover for paint, right? You can find it just about anywhere at any kind of auto parts stores or whatever. You can buy it like in a little pint can. I know Nason makes it. I'm pretty sure Exalta makes it. A few other companies. So what it is think of it as almost like a mineral spirit. It is a solvent base, but it's completely harmless to any kind of paint. You can even get it on like clear plastic parts and will absolutely like not damage it at all, okay? And think of it as like a goo remover. It'll immediately remove all that leftover stuff, if you happen to have any, and leave you a completely pristine surface. And what it also does is it's made to get rid of silicone and grease from fingerprints. So like if you're gonna if you got a painted surface and then you're going to be applying a clear coat over the top of it, standard practice in the automotive industry is they'll wipe all that down with this stuff before they put their clear on, because the clear will react to even things like fingerprints and whatever. So you can think of having a really, you want to have a really pristine surface prepared to accept the paint. That's you might want to wipe it down with that first if you're going to paint over the top of something, and then at the end, like I said, it will clean up all that stuff. You'd be surprised how really good that works. And it has a smell sort of like mineral spirits or whatever. But I've used it for years. It doesn't. I've yet to find anything that it's attacked or ruined. It's just really good stuff, and I keep it around here all the time. Okay, you guys. Well, let's. I'm going to refocus the camera here one more time. We're going to start off, and we're going to come back, and we're going to cut these masks out now. We're going to start off with these first two panels on the top of the saucer, and we've got to do a flip-flop pattern here, and I'm going to explain what that's all about. So let me get everything set up, get my goggles on, get my tools ready to go, and we'll start prepping these masks. So this is where we begin the official process of what we call weeding the masks. And what we're doing here, you guys, is we're paying attention to what our pattern is that we actually want to have, and we're going to be removing the masks that we don't want and leaving the ones we do want behind. Now, in this case, with our Enterprise Refit subject here, this is a really unique situation, because what we've got going on here on the top pattern on the saucer, for example, we've got a reverse effect. So we've got like what we call a flip-flop. So on the very first panel here, we're going to start off with, for example, I call these little shapes here like a rook, like a chess piece that looks like a rook. It's got that kind of castle-looking thing on the top of it. On the first panel here, we're going to remove this mask, right? And so that's where paint's going to be there, right? So then we follow that process of thinking all the way through. Well, the adjacent panel right next to it, doesn't matter if you go in counterclockwise or clockwise rotation, the next panel next to it is an exact photo opposite of that, okay? So we want to make sure in this case we leave the mask in place on that section so that no paint gets on that, right? So that when we look at this side by side, they're flip-flops of each other. But that same pattern continues all the way up the line here, you guys. So when we start off on this bottom one here, we want paint on that one. The next rook, which is slightly smaller, but it's the exact same shape, that one we want to cover up. So not only does it flip-flop from here to this, from one panel to another, it's flip-flopping on the entire individual panel as well. So that each one of these individual panels that you look at, if you compare them either this way or up and down, they're always opposite of each other. So that's where it gets to the part where I talked about where you've got to concentrate, guys. If you start taking your mind off. Now, here's another thing that I'll mention. This starts to go really good after you've been doing it for a little while. After you spend people will get used to it at different rates, but I found the last two times that I worked through a couple of these that you always start off, especially if I've been away from it a while, just like I have been now, you're going to be a little bit jerky and a little bit rusty and a little bit, probably overly cautious and everything. But as you go along, you start to develop that muscle memory where you start to get into this kind of groove, and you're used to, okay, these panels automatically, go this, and this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you'll be working your way through it at a much higher rate of speed. And even when it gets to the handling of the masks and all of that, the most annoying thing to me, believe it or not, is when I'm doing these, is that constantly getting them stuck on my fingers and trying to get them off while I'm, Now, we have to be a lot more careful than that with some of the masks that we're going to reuse. But for this general weeding out that we're doing here, I'm just getting these off of here and just getting them out of the way. And we're not going to be reusing any of these masks, okay? So that's, to me, actually the most annoying part of it. But you'll see what I mean when you start getting into this. You'll get into a natural sort of flow. And like I said, if you start working on these and you start to get tired, just stop, because it does require concentration, requires a nice steady hand. Don't get too aggressive, especially when you're going to pull the masks off of the model. That's when the most critical, when you have to have that nice, you know, don't drink 10 cups of coffee before you're going to do that, you guys. Okay, so let's go. Let's get these cut out. So the very first step that we're going to be doing here, as you can see on this sheet, you get 3 wedges. So we're going to be doing 2 at a time here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this end one off here right away. There's a little bit of space in between each mask. You just have to hold these in the light and you can see it. Just cut a little bit away from your edge. You can lay these down flat and cut these with a razor knife too if you want to. Okay, and then we're going to kind of trim around. You can see they got the little curve. These are going to butt right up against that little circle that's around the BC deck on the top of the bridge, on the top of the saucer. We don't have to be exact on this. Okay, just right now all we're doing is getting a little bit close. All right. Kind of follow this little curve around the bottom edge. All I'm doing is shifting it around in my light a little bit, you guys, so I can see the cut mark. They can be difficult to see every once in a while. That's where those magnifying glasses come in. Okay, now we got one little thin spot here. Let me move this stuff off to the side. We got one little thin spot right here between these two that we can cut straight up to separate these two. All right. Okay, and then just to back me up, before I even go any further, I'm going to, I can find my little marker here. Oh, I had a black one. Let's see if this will work. I'm gonna write 1 and 2 on these, you guys, on the back side, and that way when I'm weeding them I don't get mixed up by some weird reason. All right, so we've got number 1 here first. Now we've got this kind of little border that's still around there, right, with the excess material that's there. So now is when I'm putting on my magnifying glasses here, and I'm going to get right down on here, and I'm just going to make a little cut so that when I cut these, or when I go to lift them off, it's not going to try to lift the whole thing in one piece and maybe get snagged on something or whatever. So I'm just going right up to the edge and cutting it like that. And we're just going to be pulling this off. Now just kind of don't let this stuff, you know, flop around on you too much, you guys. You want to kind of control it at all times, because you don't want it to grab the mask that you're trying to save and yank one off, or, you know, something like that, because it can do that really easily. All right, now you can see we're down to just the raw mask itself. All this material that's left, we do want to have it on there and in place. Okay, and you'll see that that perfectly lines up with the I'm trying to get masks off my fingers already, you guys. You can see that that perfectly lines up with the wedge on the top of your saucer with a tiny little gap in between. Gary does actually supply you with some little filler masks if you want to, because technically what's happening is a little bit of the iridescent paint's getting down into the trench on the part of the saucer. I don't worry about that because you can't really see it anyway, but that's a little extra thing that Gary did for you if you do want to take care of that. All right, so now we've got our first basic mask cut out, you guys, and now it's time to do the weeding process. So we're going to look and see, all right, we want to start off a certain way. So this first one here, for example, I'm looking at it, we're going to remove I call it the big rook. Now when I pull it free, you'll probably see it. If you guys that are familiar with the refit and have done these before, you know what I mean, but for nobody that's seen it before. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this first one. Okay. And again, keep your fingers in the general vicinity and watch all your edges at all times. And do with your fingers what I'm doing here, guys. These bigger it starts getting easier as you get to the smaller ones. But gather these up as the loose ends come free and kind of wad them into your hand. You won't be doing it like that when you're trying to, you know, when you know you have to reuse a mask. That when you just want to be really careful, and one mask at a time. Take that off and set it on some of the backing paper until you, you know, you need to use it again. But I'm wadding this all up and keeping it in a ball so it can't flop and grab one of the masks that I don't want to pull off. Okay. Now these little small ones, sometimes they snag on the corners, so just work your tweezers underneath of it And if they do move on you, don't panic. You can slide them back and put them right where they were. Okay, that one did move a little bit. Again, this happens every once in a while, and it happens on these more often on these low. This is the lower tack type masking material, you guys. It's not very sticky. See, I just put those right back in place. Okay, so now we can see we've got another little rectangle shape right here that comes out. Okay, and then there's a tiny little line that he's got in here. It's like a filler line. You just pluck that off of there like that. Again, when we're pulling them off, just be really careful they're not snagging anything. And then we got our first pattern there. You can see, you guys. Kind of looks like an Indian pattern, if you ask me, like a Western Indian kind of a pattern that you'd see on a blanket or something like that. It's pretty cool. I've always thought that was neat, but you can see that kind of, what I was talking about, kind of, to me, it looks like a rook. Okay, so we got that. Now you can see, if you're not totally sure, just reference the next one above. Like what I'm trying to see here is that it looks like these are slightly supposed to not line up line to line. These are supposed to, so this one moved, and we're just going to bring it in a little bit. Get it squared back up. This can be kind of tedious. Like I said, that's where you try not to have this happen, you guys, but it will happen. It's just the way it is. Just kind of making sure they're as symmetrical as possible here. Just when I get it where I like it, I keep bumping it. That's pretty good. Then just push it down, roll over it with your finger. Now these bare masks, you don't want to scrape over the top of those with this, guys. Just roll make sure your hands are clean and everything, but just roll your fingers over it or whatever. Don't scrape on these without the backing tape over the transfer tape over the top of it. Okay, you'll just bend the edges of the masks. Okay, so now we're doing the exact opposite, guys. You see how this little pattern is right here? On this next row, you can see it starts, right? And so this time we left the first one we started, we left the mask. Now this time we want to take that mask away. All right, so we're just pulling those off like that. All right, and then now you can see we left these little square guys in place, so we're taking these away. And then we've got these other little patterns right here. You see these that we left behind? These have a kind of a multi-cut pattern in them, so just be really careful when you're pulling these off. Alright. Move that mask just a little bit. We'll stick him back down. Okay. Same thing over here. Just like that, guys. We have our opposite pattern now, you see. Then we've got this little thin filler line in here again. That comes off. So there's your flip-flop, you guys. You see? This way, that way, all the way on up, and it winds up just ending wherever it ends. And then the next panel adjacent to it, okay, we left this mask behind, right? Or I mean, we took this mask away. So when we start this bottom grid on this one, we're going to leave that one in place. And then just flip-flop on each panel going up, and you can't go wrong. But you do have to pay attention and make sure you keep that same flow on every time you switch from one panel to the next. Because if you miss one and you keep doing all the rest behind it, guys, the whole thing is going to be off. I'm just getting rid of more masks off my fingers. And that is not what you want to have happen, okay? So, let's continue getting the rest of this one taken care of. And I have to stop and reset myself as I'm thinking about it now, and I'll double check. Yeah, so we took the mask away this time. Now we're going to leave that one in place. We're taking the big rook. He's the toughest one because he's got these long arms that reach out that want to try to grab everything. So be careful with that one. It gets easier, like I said, towards the top where it starts to get smaller. The hardest part about him is getting these little squares to stay in place that you're leaving behind. better job this time. Let me get his corner over here loose. Couldn't save that one. Yeah, these are the thinner masks. These are the thinnest and most flexible and least sticky out of the bunch, so they're going to be. It's going to be easier for that to happen. But this time we only moved one, so let's get him back where he belongs. Looks pretty good to me. Just get them stuck back down there. Okay. Now we've got that same little filler line again. And these two little rectangles need to come out. Okay. Now we're reversing again. Taking these out, leaving the big rook guy in place, taking the little squares out of there. For the weeding, you don't have to be super careful with these tweezers. I'm being as careful as I can, but like I mentioned, when you're doing the, when you're taking these things back off of the painted surface, you have to be much more careful. That's your final product. Okay, we're getting this little guy out of here. Just like that. Okay. Now we're taking another rook. Oh, we've got a little divider line. Got to get that. That's why I don't like to let these build up on my fingers too much. But yeah, to me, that's the most stickiest situation, if you will, getting those off of your fingers. And you can't put any like anti-stick stuff or lotion on your fingers or anything to keep that from happening either, because you don't want that getting on this at all. You want to be as clean as possible here. Okay, so let's resume. And so far, I'm not seeing much of the little slivers I was noticing. Mostly notice it on the black material, probably because it's a little bit harder to cut. Okay, so all right, now we're taking the rook again. I'm gonna try to roll this guy off of here this time and see if I can get those little squares to stay behind. Yeah, got it that time. Great. Alright. Get rid of this guy. Yeah, he's grabby. He won't let go of my finger either. Stubborn little fella. Okay, so then we've got a couple little squares up in the corner here we need to get out of there. Got the little divider line again. But it's getting exponentially easier as we get to the top, you guys. Alright, now we're taking this one. Oh, got a sliver on that one. That's where we'll be using our little knife here in just a second. A couple little slivers there. Alright, let's go in there and get those cleaned out, and then you guys have just seen the entire process. And that's all I'll need to show you, because all you're going to be doing on the next one over, guys, is just make sure you start that first row the opposite of what you did the bottom row on this one. So this panel and this panel flip-flop, and then as long as you do your flip-flopping on this, going all the way up, you'll be fine. Then getting back to the third one, you start like this one was. Okay, just make sure you go back and forth on each one, and you'll be all set. Let me get the rest of these masks off my fingers, and then we'll get these little slivers removed, and we're gonna move right into the transfer tape on this one so I can show you that whole thing. Golly, these have really got me good this time. If somebody out there has a suggestion for helping me out with that, or some little trick out there, I'd like to know it, and I'm sure a lot of other people would too. And by the way, these masks will get everywhere. You'll find them on your living room carpet about a month from now. Okay, so we're down to that. Now we can bring in our transfer paper. Now, just for the heck of it, I am going to try the stuff that came with the kit here, and just see if it'll grab this lighter type stuff. And if it does, great. Because that's the whole thing. We want to, we want it to pick it up, but we want it to release really easy. But last thing we got to do here is I'm going to get right on it again. I don't know if my camera will focus, but maybe you guys can see it. There are a couple tiny little slivers left over here, right? And we want to get those out of there. So I'm just going to really careful cut them off. When you're getting down to intricate masking like this, even a machine can only do so much. And it has a lot to do with the material it's cutting too. Alright, got rid of that one. Yeah, check over your stuff real good. You want to put these on clean. If you see any little specks of anything or anything in there, just get that all off. Okay. A lot of it will get peeled off with the transfer tape too. That'll take it away. Okay, so now we're ready to put our transfer tape on there. You want to leave it just like this with its excess border. And we're going to take our transfer tape here. We're going to put this on top. And we're going to cut out a shape that's just slightly bigger than what we've got here right now, you guys. And Gary gives you plenty of this tape with the kit. You got more than enough. I remember with the orbital dry dock set, you always had to be pretty careful because he gave you like a little bit more than you needed, but you couldn't waste very much of it. This you get plenty. All right, so we've cut out that basic shape. Now we're going to peel this off of here, which is sometimes easier said than done. Okay, and we're just going to carefully lay it down. Make sure everything's flat. Keep a little bit of tension on it. You don't want to get a wrinkle in it. And just line it all up on the top and just gently drop it down on there. If you miss a little bit, don't worry. Okay, get it, kind of just basically rub it down here real quick. Oops. Okay, now we're gonna squeegee it. And what I recommend for this, you guys, is like, don't crazily like rub all over it in all kinds of directions. Just go in one direction and just apply smooth, firm pressure, kind of like this. Just up and down. Just go kind of slow. Let that, let that sink in. And we've got this beveled edge here, so I'm able to put besides just this little thin edge here, I'm putting a whole kind of flat surface on that. And that's helping. Okay. We're just right now I'm just going to test this to see if it will lift these masks without a lot of difficulty. All right. So I'll get underneath of there. I'm going to try to pull it back. They're rolling off there real good. So it's lifting these masks really good. But boy, I'm having a really hard time with the black and the blue. Certainly, the blue is really sticky. So I can work with that for this type of material. I'll just use his transfer tape here, and whenever I got something a little bit stickier, I'll use the stuff that I got, and know, like I said, guys, you have to work with a little bit. Nothing's perfect, okay? Just be fortunate that we have even a set of masks like this available, guys. This is a lot of work to produce something like this, okay? So hats off to you, Gary. It looks really good. Now, me, I would tell you right now that we're going to trim this down, right? Because sometimes you're going to, now I am going to trim this. Let me show, let me, before I get too off kilter here, I'm going to, on this one edge here, I'm gonna trim it off right on the edge of the mask, and I'll explain why as soon as I get it cut. Okay, this has to go up right against our little ring right there, so I don't want to have a lot of excess. But let's say it might be a detail on the model, right, where you're gonna have to put it right up against that. You don't want the film to be hanging out there, because the mask is, you know, the paint detail is supposed to get like right up against that edge, so you want to cut those pretty close. But like the overhang right here, I'm not worried about it. That's actually going to help me when I do the rub down and transfer these onto the model. But now once we get it to this stage right here, you guys, you don't want to wait too long. You want to, if they're lifting good and everything, you want to get them off there pretty quickly. That's what I've found. So I might have to do one little bit more rub down. So I'm going to pause real quick, and I'm going to bring the saucer in, and we're going to get this transferred and put down really quick. Be right back. We are ready to transfer our masking material onto the saucer top now. We're just about ready to do this. So off to the side, I've got my my surface here, because I'm going to squeegee over it one more time before we put it down. But what we want to do right now, you guys, I've just picked this panel right here. It's a clean panel. We don't have any phaser bank detail or anything there, and it's just a straight shot. So we're just going to show you the basic concept here of starting out. I'm putting this masking tape down right on that edge of the panel line on our pie wedge here. Want to get right up against that, nice and clean all the way down. Okay, so I'm kind of like halfway over that little line. I'm not overlapping onto one or another. I'm trying to like be halfway on that line. Okay, so we're going to leave that just like that. We can tear off this excess tape here. We're going to put another strip just like that down here. Okay. And now we've got to mask off our ring here. So that's a curve, so I'm going to be using some of this stuff. Get a little, find the end of it here. Okay. Just cut a piece of this off. Go ahead and take a look at that with my glasses so I get that on there nice and clean. Dipped a little bit there in the middle. That's good. Okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. That the mask doesn't completely come up to that either. But we're going to be using that as our starting point here to back tape away from it. Just stay back from that little edge right there, and just come back away, because when our overspray comes up like this, we don't want that to hit our bridge and BC deck there. Alright. I've got some thicker tape that will save me some time too. I'll start using that. Let me grab that real quick. And cover more ground here. Okay, and then let's just make one row here away. I'm going to spray mostly up and down like this, you guys. I'm not going to be fanning it all over the place and using real low air pressure, and you shouldn't get much overspray on the sides. I'm putting this tape down first because, as you can see, when we put this down on here like this, when we're taking our squeegee and going over it, now we're going to be protected completely. We're not going to be scraping over any bare paint. Alright, so what it's time to do now is it's time to try and see if we can get it removed from the backing paper here. So I'm squeegeeing it one more time. I really need to kind of show you this process on camera. It's going to be a little awkward for me. Normally I'll do it sitting down on this little surface, but I'll have to kind of hold it in front of the camera here for you. Because you got to kind of roll this stuff off. You don't just grab it and just peel it off in one quick shot. You got to be really slow. You got to watch and make sure it's picking up all the masks. Okay. So let's kind of go like this. Then you get it rolled over, and then you kind of fold it over. Don't fold it sharp. What you're doing is you're letting it roll, and it's sort of keeping a little bit of downward pressure. And if you kind of get one that sticks on you a little bit, just slide your finger underneath it like that and give it a little touch. Kind of go back and forth like this. Sometimes that helps. Beautiful. That's the quickest I was able to pull these off yet, so that worked really good. Now, before you go anywhere else, get it put down like really quick, you guys. So I'm just looking at the top and the bottom. We want to stay right on that line, and I nailed it. I was lucky I let it grab before I wanted to, but we're okay. It lined up where it's supposed to. We're off just a tiny little bit there, but that's no big deal. Okay, now, time to do our squeegee act. And this is where we're protecting that paint, you guys. We don't want to be scraping on top of any paint. So they lifted the masks really good, all right? Now the trick is, will it leave them behind just as good? That's what we're going to find out. And if we follow everything the way we're supposed to, we shouldn't have a problem. Okay, let's try the first lift here. Start on the bottom. Again, doing that rolling method like this. Keeping this time I'm able to use both hands, and I can keep, I'm keeping firm pressure on that. Just back and forth, rocking it like that. Watching for any mass that might try to lift. And that's the nice part about this transfer tape that he's using is crystal clear, so you can see right through it. It helps you to line up the panels. It helps you to, see what's going on with the masks. This is, when it's working, it's really good stuff. And there we have it, you guys. Masks are now down on the surface, and we are now ready for paint. We've got to mask this outer ring right here. But now you can just kind of check for any that are loose or any that might have moved for any reason or whatever. And just go over these with your fingers, like I said, you guys. You don't have to do anything more than that. Okay, so let's use a little bit more of our flexible stuff here for this curve. I don't feel bad about using this stuff at all. Like I said, guys, this was really cheap, and I'm going to actually buy some more of it. It's good stuff, for the money especially. Sticks really good, and so far I haven't seen it like advertised. It doesn't leave any kind of residue behind. Okay, now we can tape up to that with some regular tape here. Notice I've got my nice little, thanks to my, we just bought a new 3D printer, and the packing material that came in, it had this little hollow piece of really nice soft foam rubber, and it's perfect for supporting the saucer top here. And now we don't have it all flopping all over the place and everything with that sensor dome on the bottom, or just the general bulge on the bottom altogether. It's It's working out really nice because you want to have a nice stable platform for doing all this. Okay, so we're all set there, you guys. You can see the mask has now been applied. And that's basically the concept for this entire process, you guys. If you use that method right there, it's going to take you through all areas of the whole ship. You just have different patterns, and sometimes we're going to be reusing masks. You know, we might have to pick a mask off, okay, and then spray our color with the surrounding mask there, put it back, and then lift the mask adjacent to it, spray that. And don't worry, you're going to see all that when we move forward here with the rest of the paint work. So once I get all my Aztec colors on here, once the tertiary colors have all been sprayed on, then we're going to complete the rest of the markings. There are masks here for doing the thruster ports, maybe a few other little things. So all that detail will be done. We'll get all of our decals laid down on it. Then we're going to put our 1 to 2 coats possibly of clear coat over the top of all this, and it'll be all sealed and looking really spiffy. Okay, so one last thing I'm going to do is show you the painting process here, you guys. So I'll slide on over to the paint counter, or the paint booth area, and show you the blue iridescent paint going down, and I'll talk a little bit more about the paints. Alright, so here we have the 4 different colors that we're going to be using for our Aztec paneling work. Now, these paints that I'm using are the lacquer-based paints from McKensie paint. These are polytranspar type paints. This is both a flip-flopping and an interference type paint. So what we mean by that is that this is not a pearl. There's a difference between this and a regular pearl type paint. The effect that we get with this, 2 of the colors actually change color when the light hits them a certain way. The blue and I believe the gold, for the most part, are supposed to almost completely disappear when the light hits them a certain way, and that's what you call your interference color. The iridescent is the color changing. So we've got this kind of combined effect that gives you this overall shimmering, really cool prismatic effect. And these are metallics. Now, as such, they have a heavy pigment, and even if you've had these only sitting for a few days, that pigment will settle really hard on the bottom there. And even though they do have the little rattle shaker in there, that doesn't do enough to break that loose, so you actually have to get in there and stir it. So I've got one of these little electric stirring tools here, and we're just going to be working with the blue. So just talking about these paints, I'll put the link in the comments down below in the video where you can order this at. You're going to want the 4-ounce size. That's more than enough to do a refit. You can probably do 2 or 3 refits with that, because we're just spraying these tiny little amounts and spraying it really thin. And being that this is lacquer base, if you want to reduce it a little bit, you just use straight lacquer thinner. So I keep some of that handy here. Now, people are saying that they're able to spray this right out of the bottle straight into the cup, but I always like to cut my paint just a little bit. So I'm typically, what I'll do is I'll pour a little bit of this into a little Dixie cup like this, and then I'll just put a little dash of thinner in there and mix it up really good and just thin it down just a little bit. I'd say like maybe 3 to 1, something like that. 3 parts paint, 1 part thinner, and maybe even not quite that much, but just a little dash in there, and that'll help this stuff flow and move really good. The beauty of spraying lacquer too, guys, is it's a self-cleaning agent. It's a solvent base, so you won't have hardly any issues at all with your airbrush clogging up or anything like that. It'll kind of self-clean itself, and it'll all work out really good. So that's a couple little things. Now we're working with just our blue this time for this one panel, so I'll get these out of the way, and I'm going to just show you how I do the stirring thing here. Just real simple. We just take the cap right off and put this down in there, and make sure we get all the way to the bottom, you guys, where that sediment is. And then once I break that up, I kind of go up and down like this to make it like stir all the way through. Don't go out too far, or your paint will go flying all over the place. But it just takes a couple of times of doing that. You can literally look in there and see that the pigment's all been stirred up. Okay, now we're just going to put the cap back on, and we're ready to go. Now I've already thinned this. As it's gone down a little bit, I've put a little bit of lacquer thinner straight in there, so it's pretty much ready for how I like to spray. One thing you can do, and this is what I do to test, is I'll have a little, something off to the side there, and I'll spray a little bit of this down, and I'll look at it again with my magnifying glasses up close, really up close. And if you might notice that it might have like a little bit of a fine powder on the surface of it or whatever, and that means that it's too dry. You're spraying it too thick. You need to cut it. That means it's time to add a little bit of lacquer thinner and keep it a little bit more on the wet side, and then you won't see those little dust particles. They're microscopically small, but that's going to make the finish dull. You want it to be a nice kind of it's not supposed to be a glossy shine, but it's supposed to be a nice, even, smooth shine, okay? So that's one thing to kind of look for. So we're ready to pour this straight into our cup over here. Make sure your airbrush is nice and clean. Flush a little bit of lacquer thinner through it first before you use this. Then it's kind of primed for this lacquer-based paint. We're not going to need a whole lot. I would say maybe not quite a half a cup. All right, probably not even that much. I'm spraying you guys at 18 psi, so you're probably going to be barely able to even hear it. Let's go ahead and bring the saucer in now. All right. With the bright light in here, you guys, it's going to be hard for you to even see this color going down. Now, this is a little trick that I'll tell you too. I'm going to be spraying this with my magnifying glasses on. I'm going to be getting down right close and looking at it. All right, and oops, I'm off center here a little bit. Let me get you back and get you back in the shot there. Okay, and especially with certain colors here, this blue, it's almost like you won't even be able to see it on the surface here, you guys. So, and it's hard to see if you're getting good coverage. So what you want to look at is look at your masks. Okay, look and see how much overspray you're getting on your masks. It'll show up better on the masks than it actually does on the white. All right, that way you can tell actually what you're doing, because even with the adjacent paneling next to it here taped off like this, you can't tell that the contrast is changing, right? So just look at your mask and you'll see when you got a nice even paint across all of it, none of it looks cloudy, then you're good to go. But you don't want to lay it on here so thick, so just go light and then just try to get it all covered with one light coat. All right, so I'll make sure I'm in camera for you guys here, but I'm going to turn it a little bit this way so I can have a nice smooth shot at it here. I've gone through and made sure this is all nice and clean and everything, nothing stuck on there, and we're ready to go. All right, here we go, guys. Just gonna go straight up and down here. I can see it covering. I'm seeing my blue start to appear, the beautiful blue. All right, I'm going to pause right there and take a good gander at this. Just looking at my masks, you guys. Kind of see a little dryness right in here. I just want nice uniform coverage. This is going on super, super light. It's barely even a mist. That is the trick to this, you guys, because you don't want those ugly, hard edges on your masks that you just really can't get rid of. I mean, you can't sand it down because you're going to sand all your paint back off and ruin it. And if you put too much clear on it to cover it up, it ruins the effect. And that'll about do it, you guys. Like I said, now to you, you probably can't even see it, or you can barely see a little bit of the blue shimmering, maybe a little bit on the top of the mask, but the white really doesn't look like it changed, and that's the whole beauty of it. That's the invisibility part of it, you guys. Now, when you tilt this a certain way, that blue is just going to light right up, right? Going to dry it really quick with our hairdryer on low. Okay, and being that this is solvent-based lacquer and we're spraying it such a fine mist, it's already dry, you guys. You can do anything you want with it. You can even put masking tape on top of it and start and not rip it off or anything. I'm just going to look at it up close with my my specs here and just make sure it looks to me like we're all evenly covered and all that. Looks pretty good. See, one tiny little hair I missed there when we did our weeding, but that won't show up. Like I said, it's up to you whether it's so microscopically small you'll never see it. Now, it looks to me like it's just a tick on the dry side here a little bit, you guys, and it's probably calling for a little bit more lacquer thinner, but not to worry. Got a little solution for that. I'm getting low on air pressure here too. I need to run my compressor. So we're just gonna, I put straight lacquer thinner in here, guys. I'm just gonna put a tiny little mist coat over the top of that. Just getting it a little bit wet. Not soaking wet, just a little haze on there. And that'll melt all that stuff, you guys, and smooth it right out. No problem. Okay. Don't, like I said, don't put too much or you're gonna, you don't want to reactivate or get your base coat here real soft. And in this amount of time that I'm talking, it's already pretty much evaporated off of there. All right, you guys. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it sit for probably a good 10 or 15 minutes. We don't want to, we don't want to let it sit too long. It's kind of going to be your choice out there if you want to. I think it's a little bit risky, but if you want to mask off your entire saucer before you do any painting at all, that's totally up to you. But I'll just tell you that the less time that these masks are on here, the better success you are going to have getting them off. All right. It doesn't matter what they say about, okay, this one's going to come off easy or whatever. It's an adhesive, and the longer that it sits on something, the more it's going to want to stay stuck on there. Okay, so you want to try to get them off. Now, what I'm going to be doing, I just did this one little tutorial thing for you guys here, but I've made up my mind that I'm going to feel good enough about maybe doing 2 wedges at a time. And I really don't care how long it takes me. I'm just going to take my time and work my way around, and that way I'll be, I'll feel comfortable about how long these masks have been on there, and I can get them off, because the next thing that we're going to do when I come back and show you this is the most important part of this whole process. If you screw that part of it up, you've ruined all your work, and that's doing the picking and getting these off. Okay, so I'll be right back with that. I'm ready to pull all the masks now, you guys, so I'm going to get you in really close here and show how I'm working with the pick, or with the tweezers here to get these off. I'm going to be wearing my magnifying specs and getting all the light I can get on the subject and just being really careful and going to work here. First of all, I kind of start looking for any kind of loose edge that I can find. And I'm concentrating on keeping my tweezers as flat as possible, you guys. Don't stab downward, You're just trying to slide underneath of these masks. It's a lot easier to get these bigger ones, and I'm already dealing with the sticking to my fingers thing again. Just go real slow and try to follow the shape and let them come off like that. Now, I don't know if it'll show up for you guys, but there is just a thin little edge on these, and that's that leftover. It's probably the adhesive of the mask. Time for the last one, you guys. Okay, we got a clean panel. Really great. No major pick marks. It's probably inevitable that you may get one or two. Just make sure your paint's really dry and all that, and it's not still really soft or anything, and you can try to avoid that as much as possible. Again, try to get some tweezers that you really like and that you're really comfortable with. And I tried, off camera, I tried to lift those with some tape and it didn't work, so I had to pick them all by hand. Okay, but now what we can do, you guys, they're plenty dry and everything. I'm going to show you this little thing I talked about. I'm just taking a good clean, let me back you up just a tiny little bit here. I'm taking a good clean detailer's towel, and I'm using this product right here. In fact, I'm getting kind of low. I'm going to be getting some more. This has lasted me for years, but this is just particular Nason brand, but it's silicone wax and grease. They usually call it wax and grease remover. You can buy this in a much smaller can, and again, it has sort of the smell and properties of like mineral spirits, if you've ever worked with that, or turpentine, but it's not harmful at all to any paint, plastic, anything like that. It just leaves a temporary, really wet, shiny, glossy look to it. But it's going to instantly dispose of these leftover globs. And I don't know if you can hear it, but as I'm wiping over it, do you hear how rough that was, you guys? That was all that crud that was stuck on there. And you'll think it's, oh, it's my paint, or it's my, that's just what happens with the masks or whatever, but nope, it's just the leftover between, a little bit of paint and a little bit of adhesive from the masks. Alright, while this is glossy, let me pop you off the camera real quick here. What do you think about that, you guys? Pretty sweet, huh? You can see we got a nice even finish now. They'll get a lot smoother than that too once this is dry. And then what I've found in all my testing, you guys, is that the first coat of the clear will make these look just right, because you actually want to tone them down just a tiny little bit, and it'll smooth them out like to perfection too, right? Because like you're still going to have little micro, the surface of this is rough because it's got these micro particles in it that makes it give it that iridescent appearance, right? So you smooth that out slightly, and then they'll look more natural, and on the surface you get that really nice sheen that you want on the top of the surface of the Enterprise. But you really don't want to go much farther than that. So what I'm going to be doing here, you guys, is if we go beyond 1 to 2 coats, you really start pushing it, where this stuff will start to go away. You won't be able to see it, especially the lighter colors, and we don't want that to happen. So we're going to just put 1 coat of the clear once all the basic aztecing has been done on this thing, right? Then all the decals, all the other markings that get painted on that we can use masks for, that's all going to get done. Then we'll seal the whole thing up with 1 final coat of cleared. I think will be just exactly right. So this is my method, you guys. This is what works for me. So, you can always experiment around yourselves, and you might be using different kinds of paint. Like I said, you've got the Pearl X powder out there. You've got the water-based McKensie. I'm sure there's other companies like Vallejo and maybe AK that make these interference paints, but you want to make sure that you're actually getting true iridescent paint. There's very few, like I said, as far as I know, an exact match to the original is this McKensie paint. And that's why I'm choosing to use it, and I really like working with solvent-based paints and lacquers. When I show you this final reveal, guys, maybe I'll show you the, well, you'll see the, I'm going to be doing a few more panels here, because now you guys can see, how this is coming out, and some of this footage is going to be shot before I've shown some, or after, you'll see this after I've already shown a couple pictures on Facebook and everything that shows maybe a couple more completed panels. But That's the whole idea of it, you guys. You just repeat this process. We've got a few individual panels here that, like for example, the next one, I believe it's got like one of this little section right here is all gold instead of the blue. So there's a little separate mask you can use for that, or you can just do it the quick way like I do it. I just take a couple pieces of tape and just go right over it, and then when I want to do the gold color, I pull that back and just back tape up to it and dust the gold, and it's all done. But you actually do have masks. You just gotta pick through them to get, match the right one up to the right size and where it goes and everything. But the Trek Modeler Paint Guide shows you the exact spots where all the gold panels go on this saucer. That's one of the things that you can, that's one of the details that over the time, we all have been able to pick out as far as the detail on this. So, but anyways, you guys, that's going to be a wrap for this one. When we come back, we're going to have probably the whole top of the saucer, probably have all the primary color. Then I'm going to show you doing some of those tertiary colors, and that's where, to me, it really gets fun, because that's when it really starts to get that beautiful, multicolored. You can see how these are toning down right away, guys, when it's as it's drying. You see that? The idea of this is that, okay, we go like this, they're there. We look at a certain angle like this, and they're like gone. Okay? That's the interference effect. The other colors are meant to flip-flop, like the red is, or the green changes to red, and whatever it does. But there's two other colors that actually, flip-flop, and these are supposed to actually disappear. So there you have it, you guys. I hope this will help you out there. Again, shout out to Gary. Thanks for working with me on these masks, Gary. I think I'm really pleased with how everything's going here. Nothing's, no major issues to talk about at all. I'm really happy with it. And I've got different kinds of masks I can work with now in different areas and just kind of fine-tune it as I go. I'm going to be doing another refit not too long after this one, so this is actually kind of a tune-up for me, and getting back into the groove again on all this, updated materials, updated masks, updated, a lot of stuff. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. I hope you guys are enjoying watching. We'll see you next time, everybody. Take care and happy modeling.